We're going to get started. Feel free to ask questions throughout, but we'll just take a minute first to introduce everyone on the committee, just so you know who everyone is. I'm Mary Brule. I'm the Director of Student Services, and maybe we can start down here on the left. Introduce.
I'm Erin Watson, and I teach third grade at Wheelock, and I'm the union president.
Please remember speaking to the mic.
Yes, speak into the microphone because it is being live streamed and recorded.
Do you want me to do it again?
Oh, everyone's at home watching.
Thank you. I thought I might be.
I'm Margot Hayes, fourth grade teacher at Dale Street.
Kathy Rubinski, grade 1 at Memorial.
Christine Power, Director of Instruction and Innovation.
Athena Polacronis, sophomore at MHS.
Shane Unger, junior at MHS.
Robert Parga, principal at Medfield High School.
Will Horn, I'm the dad of a 4th and 5th grader and on the school committee.
Diana Frischella, a mom of a 4th grader and a 6th grader, and also on the school committee.
Caitlin Scheck, I am a mom of a kindergartner and pre-K.
Matt Vaughn, middle school principal.
I'm Hannah Gardner. I am a mom of an 8th grader and a 4th grader, and I'm also a medical professional. I'm an epidemiologist in the neurology department.
Excellent. Thank you for joining. We are the School Start, or members of the School Start team committee. Not everyone is here today, but this is everyone that was available, which is a great showing. So we wanted to start off really introducing some of the science of sleep, and that was kind of some of the first meeting that we started with. We really worked on this. I'm going to give a summary of it because Robert and I, as the co-chairs, were presenting, but if you have further questions, we do have an expert on the committee that could answer in great detail. So some of the science and some of the literature that we reflected on was that adolescents and teenagers typically need 9.25 hours of sleep per night to promote health. Reduced sleep has been associated with many poor health outcomes as well, including impaired cognitive functioning, school performance, attention, mood, cardiovascular health, as well as increased risk-taking and behavior problems. Adequate sleep is crucial for both brain and heart health, and both short-term and long-term, and that's true for children, teenagers, and adults. The other piece that we learned a great deal about was that the natural circadian rhythms change during adolescence. So it makes it even harder for adolescents to go to bed before 10:45, which sometimes people say, you know, if they just went to bed earlier, they wouldn't be so tired in the morning. But part of their kind of natural rhythm changes during those years, which makes it that much more difficult to get to sleep. And so even if you kind of created the ideal environments, it would still make it difficult for students to get to bed earlier than that. So those were some of the key pieces of information that we listened to and heard and have been keeping in mind as we are working as a committee throughout this.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the work we've been doing since February, last 5 months or so. As Mary indicated, there are 23 members actually on our Start Time committee. It's comprised of teachers, administrators, parents, school committee members, and we have 2 students on our committee as well. So our first meeting took place back in February, and we developed some norms for our group to follow along through this process. As Mary indicated, Dr. Gardner presented to us in our first meeting to share a lot of information that really helped us better understand the science behind all of this. And we also, as a group, discussed some potential challenges that a start time would create for not only for teachers, but for students and families as well. Our next meeting, we ended up focusing on 6 subgroups. We wanted to sort of break the committee up to focus on specific topics. So the topics included a subcommittee for staff considerations, one for family and student considerations. We had a subcommittee that looked at scheduling, another one that looked at transportation, one that looked at extracurricular activities, and another one that looked at communication. And we really wanted to discuss all things that would potentially be impacted, included collective bargaining with teachers, some impacts that we might see as a result of a different traffic pattern in town if we were to move our start times. There's some childcare considerations, both for families and for staff, the impact on busing and extracurricular activities as well. In that second meeting, the communications subcommittee also discussed the need to survey both students and families, which we'll go over in a little bit. And we also talked about the need for a public forum, which we're doing tonight. Our last meeting, we brought in a couple of people within the district that could help answer questions that some of us couldn't have. First, we brought in Michael LaFrancesca, who's our Director of Finance. Michael also oversees the busing, so we really needed to get some information from him to better understand sort of the impact that a late start would have. One of the things that Michael shared with us that was important to note is, so as you know right now, each morning and each afternoon we have 2 bus runs. There's a secondary bus run that brings the students from Blake and high school students to school, and then there's one for the elementary schools. And Michael shared with us, based on the number of buses we have in town, that they need approximately 35 minutes between when the students are dropped off and when the next bus run begins. So knowing that, that will really help us determine if we do end up making a recommendation for a later start time. We're going to sort of have to work around that as well. Eric Scott, our athletic director, also presented. There's some impacts, as you can imagine, for athletics, particularly at the high school, after school. One thing to note, so Medfield High School is part of the Tri-Valley League. There are 12 schools in our league. Right now, all but 3 of the schools have already shifted over the past. It's taken place gradually, I'd say, over the last 6 or 7 years. So what's happened is, as a result of almost everyone that we play has already, because almost everyone that we play has already shifted, we've already sort of shifted our athletic schedule. For example, I was out on the baseball field earlier. We used to start our baseball games at 3:45. Now we're starting the games at 4:30. We're still able to get it in with the time change, but the impact that a later start would have with us wouldn't be a whole lot different from an athletic standpoint, because we've just kind of had to make that shift already to accommodate all the other schools. In our last meeting, we also looked at survey data, and I'll go over a little bit of that as well. Thank you. So it was great. We sent the survey out to about 2,700 families in town, and we received 1,300 responses, which is a really good response for us. And we asked lots of questions in terms of the need for families for needing an older child at home, either before school or after school. We wanted to try to get a sense of what that was. For example, almost 90% of our families said that the percentage that need an older child to be home for younger children after school, for example, 90% of families said no, 10% said yes. One other interesting piece of data, we wanted to try to get a sense of the percentage of students that walk in the district versus those that get to school via a parent or a bus, whatever. About 15% of our students walk. That is students in all grades. So about 85% of our families either take the bus, or our students are either take the bus, drive, get driven to school, or in the case here at the high school for juniors and seniors in particular, drive to school. So that was the number that we wanted to look at. The student survey data was interesting. You know, we looked at the data from grades 8 through 12. Those were the students that were surveyed. In general, the middle school students are going to bed roughly between 9:30 and 10:30 at night. There's definitely some outliers on either side. High school between 10:30 and 11:30, I would say maybe leaning more closer to 11:30. Again, some outliers on either side. The students were sort of mixed in their responses in terms of their feeling about a later start time. So under the category, if you ask, they will tell you. I think a number of our students said they would be in favor of a later start time as long as we kept the end time the same, which.
Robert, if I may, some of the educators wanted a later start time and an earlier.
I think there were a couple of those
They
too.
were doubling down a little bit. So.
Yes, a lot of sleep is needed for a lot of our students. So anyway, it was good data for us to look at. Certainly information that we will take into account before making a recommendation.
We also wanted to discuss some of the known factors that we already are aware of and that we wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we were taking into account. So I think there's been a lot of talk, and I hear it, and I know at other meetings people are talking about it as well, about there being a switch of elementary and secondary start time. So the secondary start time now becoming elementary and the elementary becoming the secondary, and just doing a flip of that. That is not something that we're looking at based off of some of the information that Mr. LaFrancesca gave us when he indicated that the secondary students are currently, the first pickup starts around 6:50 a.m. During the winter months, it's dark at that time, and we didn't feel that it would be safe for elementary students to be waiting for the bus in the dark. So just, that's kind of the one thing that we do know, is that at this time, we're not looking at an outright switch. We are still determining whether there should be a change. We are still determining, what that change may be. But the one thing is that if we decide there would be a switch, it would not be an outright flip. We also know that, as Robert was just mentioning, there's 35 minutes that is needed at a minimum in between the routes. And that's what exists right now, from the last drop-off for secondary and then the first pickup for elementary. There has to be at least 35 minutes in between the start of those. Also, the teacher contract workday is 7 hours and 15 minutes, which is just something that we need to know in terms of making sure that if any changes to schedules are met, that we consider the teacher workday, what has to happen in terms of time after school, and when that exists. We also know that any recommended schedules would need a discussion of what the traffic patterns would be at that time and their impact on busing, and that might make changes as well. So that's one thing that we also are aware of and considering. And then another piece is that the Medfield Before School program is run by the schools, so those could be expanded. That's one thing that we do have control of, so it's a known factor that we have, that if necessary, those programs could be expanded because we do have control over those. In terms of next steps, the committee is meeting again on May 14th, and then if the committee feels that given what we've done so far, including the information gained through this public forum, that there's enough information to make a recommendation by June, we will do so. If we feel as though there's not enough information given at that time, we'll reconvene starting in September to continue doing work until we feel that we have the information necessary to make a recommendation. That recommendation will then be made to Dr. Marsden. Dr. Marsden will then bring a recommendation to school committee. Then union negotiations are due to any proposed changes. And then any changes will not take place until the 25-26 school year. So that's another thing that I think gives people a little bit of some angst when they're hearing about this work that's happening. Even if a recommendation is made by this committee for a change in June, it would not go in effect until the school year 25-26. So just so people know, there's plenty of time to kind of make changes. We as a district would need to make changes as well, as in terms of busing, in terms of activities, in terms of before school care. There are a lot of things that would need to go into that, and we want to make sure that we have plenty of time for any proposed change if a recommendation does come from this committee. And with that, we are going to turn it over to you. We're hoping that, as we said, with the communication subcommittee was hoping that by doing the survey, by kind of having the different representatives on the committee, and then by doing this public forum, we may gain more information and things that we're not currently considering or we haven't discussed that you may be able to bring forward. So if you have any questions, clarifying questions, or if you're thinking of things that you think we should be considering, we would love the feedback. And Erin is going to walk around with a microphone, so just because it is being live streamed and recorded, so we will have a microphone for you to speak into as well.
And it would also be great if you could just say, like, if you're a parent or what grade your kids are in, just for, I think, helping give us context.
Hello, Kate Blood. I have 3 boys, range of ages in Medfield schools, and I'm grateful that you guys are doing this. I wish it could happen even sooner. Um, I guess I'm wondering sort of what is your, I think you're asking us, what's missing for information? I guess I feel like there is a compelling case already that has been made. Is there anything else that you guys are planning on looking into or pursuing, or is it really just if you get feedback from the public that they want to know something?
I think in general, some of the things that we were hoping to get some information from here that we would also look into, but I think in general, you know, if we do think that there needs to be a recommendation, we want to be able to make sure that it's reflective of the needs of students, that it's feasible within the busing. So any recommendations or conversations in terms of actual timing, we would need to do more research and have more conversations amongst this group. We also then would want to make sure that we're kind of looking at the impact. One thing that we've been taking a look into are some of the attendance datas and the tardies, and seeing, you know, how tardy are students. So I think that would be something that we would be bringing to the committee next time, to have conversations across all buildings. What does it look like? What impact may a start time change have on all 5 buildings in terms of that? I don't know if anyone else has other thoughts in terms of conversations that we continue to have.
Yeah, I would add just one other thing we need to look further into, is the impact this might have on some youth sports that use some of our facilities. Baseball, for example, you know, the youth sports aren't able to get onto the field like they used to. Even with some of our, in the winter, you wouldn't think this would impact winter so much because most of them are indoor sports, but if, you know, the first game is starting a little later, that means the second game is a little later, and so on. So we need to, you know, make sure that that's in play as well. There are a couple sports teams in the fall that it might impact a bit more, in particular cross country and golf. So we would need to sort of look at that a little closer to make sure that we can get our students to those places and have enough sunlight to do what they, you know, the practices and matches and whatnot.
Look out, they're passing themselves, Aaron.
Medfield for, I think, 2 full school years now. I have 2 older kids for which will age out before this becomes an issue, but my son here is here to show his support for this change. I hear about it every morning, so just kind of show his support. So in our prior community, when they changed the school start time, the biggest parent pushback was about school sports. And I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the presentation, so I don't know if you covered this already. And I think what, you know, 2 things helped push it over. One, that we don't have any control over, was COVID, because then, you know, when we returned from COVID, you know, everybody was just so excited to get back to school. Nobody had any energy to complain about anything. Well, that's not entirely true, but we didn't complain about school start time at that point. And the other thing that helped was just that the surrounding communities were also changing, and so now the intercollegiate sports, you know, I guess the travel teams, you know, it wasn't like one school was out and waiting for the other school to get out and show up. So, so again, apologies if you've already talked about this, but, you know, are the area communities with which we, you know, like Westwood, where the kids go to play for sports, have they already changed, or are they in sync with this?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, and, you know, happy to say it again. And we're in the Tri-Valley League. Medfield High School's in the Tri-Valley League. There's 12 schools in our league, and we're one of 3 that hasn't changed. So this change has gradually happened over the years. So as a result, over the past several years, we've already changed our schedules to accommodate the majority of the schools that come into play with us. I used the example earlier. Our baseball, we used to start at 3:45. Now, well, I was out there earlier tonight, we start at 4:30. So from an athletic standpoint, we've sort of already made that shift, because almost everybody that we play has made that shift. So any change that we make, for the most part, would not change the start times for our athletics team. One of the things that has come up, sort of an unintended consequences, I guess, is as a result of, you know, fewer games, if you will, because we're starting later. Some of the schools have seen an increase in weekend sub-varsity games. So, you used to be able to play, say, 3 games on a Thursday night. If we're starting later, sometimes you can only get 2 in, which might lead to a Saturday game here and there. So that definitely has come up with some teams, and it varies by sport. But for the most part, we've had to change our sports schedule already to accommodate the other schools that have changed.
One of the other trickle-down effects we saw is sort of the need then for lighting on more fields. And I know, for instance, the Wheelock soccer fields don't have lighting. Do you anticipate sort of a push for, but it sounds like the sports were already later, so if that push hasn't existed now, that doesn't sound like there'd be a sort of town-wide push for more lighted fields.
I would love it, and our athletic director would as well. I'm not sure we're the committee to answer that one, but yeah, it would be great to have that in town for.
Thank you again for doing this.
But I think that probably is something that, is helpful for us to kind of consider in terms of, I think for the varsity teams, and they're playing more for soccer. Where are they playing?
Varsity soccer is primarily here, so we have access to the lights.
Yep.
Some of the sub-varsity games are over at Wheelock. We've been using those fields for a while, and yeah, they definitely bump up to the time the sun is going down. So yeah, I think lights would be great, but that's not in my.
I think again
right
that
now.
has more of the impact on the youth sports, so we would want to have conversations with the youth sport leagues to make sure that the changes aren't directly impacting them as well. I noticed that we have one more committee member that came in. I just wanted to give her an opportunity to introduce, since everybody else had to.
Hi, Meredith Chamberlain. I'm a parent of a high schooler, and I'm also a school
Thanks.
My name is Erin Tishik. I have a 4th and 5th grader as well as a 1st grader. I don't really have any major concerns about the change. I think it's sort of inevitable given that all the other school systems are doing it, and it does seem like a good idea. I know my 5th grader voiced to me some concerns about having less time for homework if he's getting out of school later, so just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. And then also just thinking about the implications of like how it would affect our schedule. Do you have any concrete ideas about what the start and end times might be for the high school, middle school, and elementary school?
No concrete plans for that.
Okay.
Again, that's more once we've kind of gathered all of at this point we've been doing a lot of the information gathering, the kind of opinions and thoughts and information from the town and from students and from staff, but no actual schedules have been kind of discussed in any realistic manner at this time. So I don't think we would be able to say with any confidence any kind of real thoughts at this time.
For your child going into middle school, I can speak as a parent, there is more than enough time to do the homework. Nat, you could probably say how much homework is assigned, but it's minimal. Saying that with it, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and that would be like a very heavy night. And that's from a 6th grade perspective, but I don't know what the expectation is.
Yeah, I think, what we've actually been looking, not to sidetrack and take over, but from the homework data, it really depends on the child. There is that reality. I think what I hear, what I hear from talking to students a lot too, is some of their kind of gut concerns is not necessarily about homework, about their other activities that they're involved in, which does impact homework. But as we know, I'm a parent of three kids too, and I'm guilty of overscheduling our own children. I think that's what we hear from the kids is there's the homework factor, but it's that plus the other pieces after that I think that worry, which that's a challenge that we're all struggling with. But I think from the time perspective, I would agree. I think in general, 6th grade is not that different from 5th. There's definitely an increase to 7th, and there's something we're looking at consistency, but it does vary. Even data I was looking at today could vary. For an 8th grader, they report one kid could stay 30 minutes, same class, another kid 90 minutes. That's a hard thing that we're wrestling with. But I do think those are factors that we've also talked about as a committee is making sure that what recommendations that we would still have a late bus for kids after school, because that's something that we have not always historically had. That's been very important, that we make sure we have. And also impact on meeting times, and I think that's one thing that, you know, Erin could speak to more from a Teachers Association perspective. Those are things that would have to be ironed out, that have that after-school factor, making sure, because we also do not want to extend the later in time and forgo activities for kids too. Because like intramurals are really important for kids, the theater program, all those things too. And will that abut into other considerations? So those are all some factors. I hope that didn't sidetrack your question.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a sixth grader that actually did cross country through the school in the fall, did unified basketball in the winter, and is doing track. And the track meets start late anyways because the other school systems have already gone later. And then even, you know, he does club sports too. Like, there's been enough time, and he does have a busy schedule. But I think the other thing that nobody has mentioned thus far is just there's a week, like I can see all the homework that's going to be assigned a whole week in advance. So if I'm like, okay, Monday's crazy, Thursday's easier, like you can map it out. So you sort of ebb and flow and work around it that way. So I think given the extra time plus the ability to map out, you kind of figure out a way to make it all work.
Do you, I know the overall idea is that the kids will function better with the sleep cycle aligning more with sort of what our circadian rhythm and what our bodies do. I'm wondering if there is research that somehow is able to quantify the benefits of sort of like in terms of, you know, you feel like you're losing an hour if you're shifting, hypothetically you shift an hour, but potentially if like brain processing is like stronger and people are more awake, you know, it like you're more efficient. So I was wondering if there is any research out there that sort of Hannah.
Yeah,
Hannah.
There has been some research. Basically, the data from schools that have made the switch, both in the United States and actually in other countries too, have suggested a lot of benefits. And it suggested that kids pretty much continue to go to sleep at the same time, but they get to wake up later, so they have more sleep, and so they do better in school. They are generally really satisfied with the change, and any sort of cognitive data has suggested real benefits. So not just in school performance, but in actual sort of neuropsychological benefits, and mood and behavior benefits as well.
Give him the awkward pause just to make sure. Extra wait time. I think, you know, just coming tonight is helpful. You know, we wanted to make sure that we get as many, you know, voices. And so if you know of people that have questions or have thoughts or, you know, have not been able to attend tonight, you know, sending those on so that we can make sure that we're considering all angles. Or if they have thoughts on what we've done so far. As we said, this is recorded, so they can kind of tune into it, and making sure that we know and we are able to make informed decisions as a result. Any other thoughts?
So yes, reaching out to Mary is great. You can reach out to Will or I and the school committee in general. And again, just making sure people know that the information, they can watch this, or, right, we have posted some minutes, so there is access to what we've been thinking and the data we've collected.
And Robert and I haven't even set the agenda for the next meeting because we were hoping to gain some information from this in order to help us. So, you know, you can absolutely let us know if you have other thoughts.
I have one.
Yeah.
I also, I just want to like echo that, like from your question about homework and things. I think if there are concerns on that, reach out to the schools. I mean, truly, like regardless about the impact or expectations, I think that's such an important conversation that sometimes we hear concerns about the stress or how that impact we don't always hear. And I think that's sometimes we're making assumptions. And that's some things we're looking at as teachers assigning work and thinking, I think this may take 20 minutes. Some kids report it only took 5, some say 40. We don't always know, so I think that's just such an important, that's much more on a granular level, but I think it's really important in regards to scheduling, and when we know, we want to make sure we're aware of that. And I hope I'm speaking for others in that regard.
Okay, I think so. Thank you so much for coming. As we said, if you have questions or comments or anything, you can reach out to anyone on this committee or to Robert and I, and we'll make sure that everybody gets it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert and me.